Kia ora and welcome. Welcome to another episode of The Leadership Lounge. I'm Katie, your host, and it is great to be back. Again, still with my tinny, slightly weird sound, but that's okay. We're all good with it. The Leadership Lounge, a space for healthcare leaders to take their moment of pause, to stop, to reflect, to think, to take that big breath that we all need from time to time. Now, I really appreciate some of the comments and emails and things I've been getting after coming back and responses to the No Jedi email. It's been really lovely to connect with so many people. And last week I talked about the 4 things that were kind of in the midst of this big move that has been more overwhelming and more disjointing than I anticipated. What have been the things that have helped keep my head above ground? And my intention was to dive a bit more into those, to explore them a little bit more, because they were the 4 pretty common topics that I talk about, but they were the big topics that we could go into in a lot of depth, and we could sit down, grab that coffee and chat a bit more about. It was a space of gratitude. It was about reflecting rather than ruminating, and within that, this space of being kind to myself, but also cultivating that mindset, that growth mindset, but that belief and hope in what was gonna eventuate. And in the midst of that, a real practical thing, which was writing a done list every day or every week. I have to confess, I haven't done one every day this week, but I will be doing one. Because today, actually, as I'm sitting recording this, marks 3 weeks back in the UK. So actually, when I stop and think about what we have achieved and what we've done, it is actually quite a lot. So that's making me feel good, just realising that. However, I sat down and I was starting taking some notes as to how this could go and what this could look like and what I would share with you and what our conversation today was going to be about. And I kept getting stuck because of the incredible amount of inhumane and downright wrongness going on in the world, as well as some ridiculous things and as well as some stuff that is kind of almost turning us backwards rather than into the spaces and the places of hope and inclusivity and understanding that we had been heading in. So it's kind of like how in the midst of some of the inhumaneness that is going on, the death, the destruction, all of that, how am I supposed to talk about anything that is anything, if that makes sense? Who am I in the midst of this to offer anything else out there? And so I came down to, okay, so if that's the world we're living in right now, there are lessons that we need to learn from that, because we're not, whatever job we're in, wherever we are connected within healthcare, we're not devoid from all of that stuff. But we do still have to show up and do a job. So we still have to acknowledge that and do the things that we need to do. So I came to a couple of things that came out as I was sitting twilling and noting and journaling and trying to think about this. One of the phrases that I come to when life, the world and the universe can feel overwhelming is this idea of changing the world where we are. Because there are some really big things. So again, it probably comes down to that idea of circle of control, but it helps to make you realise that the small actions that you take every day does have a ripple effect on the world around us. And if we're all doing that, that will create big ripples. So this idea of change the world where you are. Now, I also believe that this means, including things signing petitions, writing to MPs, it means being interested in the injustices that connect with you particularly, whether it's homelessness or whether it is injustice or whether it is, whatever it is, do the stuff, do the work. So we can't just avoid this. We do need to do something about it. And that looks different for all of us because we have different capabilities, we have different resources, we have all different amounts of time, different commitments. But we can't be oblivious to what is going on around us. So change the world where you are, do the work. But it also means that it's in your everyday that you can change the world. And I remember once I kind of got some feedback around how I influence the energy in the room. And that could go for good or for bad. So let's think about how we want to influence the energy of the rooms that we are in, the conversations that we're in. What do we want that energy, that feeling to be? And how do we use our influence for good in those spaces? So don't be knocked down or belittled by the energy in the room. Influence the energy, change the energy in the room. Use what you've got within you. And the other thing, the final thing that I was writing these notes about, okay, what do we do when we're faced with this, all this stuff going on? It's this idea of kindness. Be kind to each other. We don't know the loads that the people that we pass are carrying. We don't know what they've had to deal with that day. Just be kind. Give people some grace. Now, when I'm talking about being kind, I know you know that this is not about being soft and fluffy and letting people get away with things. This is not about not holding a line and not holding boundaries. But it is about being clear. It is about being respectful. And it is about empathy and understanding. So they were the things that I came with. And then I took a big breath and I started thinking a bit more, okay, if we need to do those things, then we need something within ourselves. And so if you're going to change the world where you are, then you do need an incredible amount of self-awareness, because you can't just go gung-ho off into this stuff. You need to know what you need to stay motivated and energized to do that, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, because a lot of this work is hard work. And if you're holding a job in leading in healthcare, you're being conscious of the world around you and being politically aware and responsible, then that all takes energy. So you need to know what you need to keep that motivation and energy up. So I think I've mentioned in the past this idea of a model I created called Spark and Support. I've actually redone it. I've revamped it, and it's now called Lead Well. And it's these 4 elements of when we feel what our energy is like, but also the connection, because the people around us are really important to how motivated and energized we can feel, for good or for bad, right? So that's coming really soon. So there's a bit of a teaser trailer for that. But you do need to understand what you need, because that's the stuff that's going to keep you in the game. That's going to be the stuff that's going to keep you changing the world where you are. So you need to know things like, what is it that gives you energy and what is it that drains your energy? Are you a dance around the kitchen kind of woman, or are you a sit and meditate? Or is this about journaling regularly? What are the habits that you need to do to keep your motivation and energy up? Which comes back kind of a bit of in a circle to the 4 things that I was talking about last week. But they're different for every one of us, right? So you need to know what yours are, and you need to build that so that you've got that sustainability within yourself. Leading in healthcare alone is a tough job. It's an exhausting job. You are called upon at all sorts of times of the day. You're expected to deal with all sorts of demands constantly. You need to have that awareness within yourself of what is it that sustains you, and how do you make that then a habit. You also need to know, and this is really important because you can kind of just plod on. I'm a great one for determination and pushing on, and this idea of grit, definitely. And I've been doing a lot of that in a few different ways this last couple of weeks. But we also need to know when to rest, because rest has got a bit of a bad rap, hasn't it? It's kind of gets labelled with you've not worked hard enough, you're lazy, you've got so much more to do. We can kind of beat ourselves up about rest. But it is so, so important. So important as part of that maintaining and sustaining yourself and the work that you need to do. So noticing and knowing when you need to rest versus when you need to buckle down and dig in. And that varies from day to day. So I guess what I'm saying in all of this, if we were sitting there over coffee, I'd be saying this all comes down to our of self-awareness and being able to check in with ourselves, which does bring you back to that space of reflection, because that is often where you get those clues from about where you're doing, because all of a sudden you can find yourself knee deep, neck deep in a whole load of stuff, and you're like, hang on, I've got nothing left in the tank. How am I going to do this? which is why those regular habits of reflection can be really useful, are really useful. So it feels like I've gone in a bit of a circle around. I wanted to talk a bit more about the things I talked about last week and why they're so important and how digging into them a bit more. And then I felt overwhelmed by the world, and then learning from my own reflections and my own note-taking on this. It was about understanding that we change the world where we are. That putting our light out into the world and being kind to each other will have ripple effects that we will have no idea where they end up. And if we are all doing that, then I do believe that we will change the world. And that is how these things do happen. It doesn't feel like that right now. Doesn't feel like that right now because all the other stuff is very loud and very noisy and very bad. But we must keep at it, which is why this idea of sustainability and knowing what you need is so important. So all of that then brought me way back to where I was going to originally start, which was I'm listening to a book by Susan Cain at the moment called Bittersweet. It's a relatively new book, and I had started reading it ages ago and then didn't finish it, so I got it out on Libby to listen to, and it felt kind of important right now because this whole move has felt a bit bittersweet, really. There's some joy and excitement in it, but there's also some sadness in it. And so it's been useful to explore it. But what was interesting in the chapters that I've just been listening to was this idea that those of us who can acknowledge and accept, sit with those tougher, darker, harder times and harder emotions prove to be better at handling stress and anxiety. Now, this kind of resonated for me for a number of reasons, probably a lot to do with the work I've been doing and still do with the Emotional Culture Deck, where we can get into really good conversations about there's no such thing as good emotions or bad feelings. These emotions are data, not direction. And they're telling us something that's important, something that matters. And so labeling something as bad and crushing it down or trying to ignore it, like I'm feeling sad, let's ignore it. I'm feeling angry, let's ignore it. It's not good to feel angry. I don't want to feel angry. And just trying to fight it doesn't actually help us in the long run. And so Bittersweet was kind of reminding me of that, which connects in with this idea because the stuff that you're dealing with, whether it be in the whole world situation or whether it be in your job, can often lead to some of those less desired emotions. So being able to acknowledge them and accept them and sit with them, not try to just brush them aside or crush them down or smother them with some toxic positivity, that means that you're probably going to prove yourself to be better at handling stress and anxiety, which again comes full circle. This is just like a whole load of circles I'm drawing today. It feels like comes again full circle into this idea of being sustainable and being able to change the world where we are. And I think the final thing that pulls into this, and initially I wasn't going to share it because then I thought, oh no, that really doesn't sit right now in the space of all the stuff that's going on in the world. But it's this idea that was popularised by Jim Collins in his book Good to Great, called the Stockdale Paradox. Now, I've written a blog post about this and trying to explain about it and where the stories all come from. But it is about a general who was held as a prisoner of war, and he was talking about the people he saw struggling with the being held prisoner, and it was the optimists who really did struggle. They didn't make it out. The optimists didn't make it out because they kept saying, we're going to be out by Christmas, and Christmas would come and Christmas would go. And they'd say, we're going to be out by Easter, and Easter would come and Easter would go. And then all of a sudden it was Thanksgiving, and then it was Christmas again, and then they died of a broken heart. So he was kind of like thinking these optimists who I would call myself an optimist an awful lot of the time. So this has always challenged me, this concept. But there's this Stockdale Paradox. He then says, this is a very important lesson. You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be. So that's the best quote, or that's his quote, which I think sums it up. So, you must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end. So that's that hope, that's that belief, that's that mindset stuff. And he says you can never afford to lose that. But don't confuse that with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be. Now, I do think that is a broad enough concept to be applicable in whatever you are dealing with right now. And, I don't know, maybe when we look at the world and some of the stuff that's going on, when I look from my space of immense privilege, sitting loved and cared for with food in the house and a warm, safe, dry place to call home, when so many people don't have those things. I didn't want to sound condescending or trite around tough times. But I think this idea of empathy and self-compassion, so if you're feeling like this is a tough time, I think the hope and belief that we will prevail over some of these injustices, we can't lose that. But it also means that we cannot ignore the current situation. So that's kind of how I got to that position. I started with the Stockdale Paradox. I then started thinking, I can't possibly talk about that because there's so much bad stuff going on. And then I started thinking, okay, so what do we do? What do we do with all this bad stuff? And then I think, well, to do that, we need to do this. We need to look after ourselves. We need to know what sustains and motivates us. And then that brought me back to this idea of being able to sit with the hard stuff, whatever that might be for you. And that brought me back, again, this massive circle that I've just been drawing around and round today, back to the Stockdale Paradox. Now, if I have lost you at any point in this conversation, I'm not surprised. I have notes with arrows and circles, and it really was a unravelling of my brain and my thinking that has come out in this conversation. I didn't know a better way of doing it, but this was the realest I could get over the world and the stuff that we have to deal with as human beings, and also as leaders in healthcare who need to keep showing up and doing the work. Tough, eh? No one said this was going to be easy, right? So if I have lost you, I'm really sorry. I don't know if listening again will help. You could send me an email and go, wait, what were you talking about? Write it down, pull out this bit, tell me, please do. But I will, of course, put a whole load of links into some various different things so you can go, oh yeah, that's the bit. So whether it be about Bittersweet, which is a really cool book, actually, I'm really enjoying it. Whether it be about the emotional culture deck and how that can help you have conversations about your own feelings or your team's feelings. Whether it be about the Stockdale Paradox, which is a really cool thing to get your head around, I have to say. Whether these ideas of toxic positivity and optimism and how that balances out with that belief that we will prevail, the idea of hope. So I'll chuck down my usual list of links and I will try and pull some of these pieces together in my weekly email that will be coming out. I have no idea now because of the whole I'm on one day, you're in the other. If you're listening in New Zealand, you're in the future. Just remember that. I'm now in the past. I don't know what that does for any of us. So yes, in the weekly email, the No Jedi email, nothing to do with Star Wars, but a bright spot in your inbox of ideas, inspiration, and that part of your motivation and sustainability for leading in healthcare. That's what this email is about. And you could subscribe to that at katiequinney.com. And don't forget, of course, the teaser I've left in there about Lead Well, which is the revamped spark and support that will be coming out very soon. Okay. Whew. I feel like I'm going to make another cup of tea now. Take a big breath. Let's just recenter before we get back on with the day, the week that you'll be having. All right. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of The Leadership Lounge. I am Katie. I'm your host. It is a pleasure to be talking to you every week. And I will be back next week for another episode. In the meantime, remember, you are doing way better than you think you are. And by the small actions that you take, you are changing the world where you are. And together, we can make an incredible difference. All right, you take care. All the best, and I'll be back next week.